The microphone screeched. 200 guests turned. And my daughter's new husband pointed a finger straight at me and said, "Somebody get this ugly rat away from the cake table before she embarrasses us." Laughter rippled through the crowd. My daughter didn't defend me. She just looked down at her shoes. What none of them knew was that in exactly 11 minutes, the man who owned that entire vineyard estate, the one who'd flown in on a private helicopter 20 minutes earlier, was going to walk across that dance floor, take my hand and call me by a name nobody at that wedding had heard in 23 years. My name is Eleanor Voss. I'm 61 years old. I raised my daughter Claire alone after her father left when she was 4, working double shifts at a diner in Ohio for 11 straight years before I finally built a small chain of bakeries that let us breathe again. Claire never wanted for anything. But somewhere along the way she started being ashamed of where we came from. She met Bradford Kane at a charity gala 3 years ago. Old money. Country club smile. The kind of man who shakes your hand while looking over your shoulder for someone more important. The first time I met his family, his mother looked at my hands, still rough from decades of kneading dough, and asked if I'd considered a manicure before events like this. I laughed it off. Claire didn't. That should have told me everything. The wedding was held at Hargrove Estate, a vineyard so expensive that Bradford's father bragged about the price of the flowers alone. I wore the navy dress I'd bought for the occasion, simple pearl earrings that were once my mother's, and I sat quietly at table 14, the table closest to the kitchen doors. Not the family table. Table 14. I told myself it didn't matter. I was there for Claire. The ceremony was beautiful. She looked luminous. For a moment, watching her walk down the aisle, I forgot every small cruelty and just felt proud. Then came the reception. Bradford had been drinking since the toasts began. By the time dinner service started, his words had that loose, careless edge that alcohol gives men who've never been told no. I only wanted to fix my daughter's veil, which had slipped during the first dance. I walked toward the head table, smoothing my dress, smiling. That's when he saw me coming. "Oh God," he said into the microphone, still holding it from his earlier toast. "Somebody get this ugly rat away from the cake table before she embarrasses us." The room laughed, some out of shock, some out of the ugly comfort of cruelty when it's aimed at someone else. I froze. Claire's hand found Bradford's arm. For one heartbeat I thought she'd correct him. Instead she whispered, "Brad, stop," in a tone so soft it barely counted as defense. I stood there in front of 200 strangers in my navy dress, holding my mother's pearl earrings, and I felt smaller than I had in 30 years. I turned to walk back to table 14. That's when I heard the helicopter. Every head turned toward the vineyard's private landing pad, where a sleek black helicopter was touching down in a swirl of dust and rose petals torn loose from the arch guests murmured. Bradford's father straightened his jacket like a man expecting royalty. "That's him," someone whispered. "That's Julian Cole." I didn't know the name, but apparently everyone else did. Julian Cole owned Hargrove Estate and 6 other venues across 3 states. A man worth more than the entire Kane family fortune combined, according to the whisper spreading table to table like wildfire. He ducked under the helicopter blades, dressed simply in a charcoal suit with no tie, and walked toward the reception tent with the easy confidence of a man who never had to prove anything to anyone. Bradford's mother practically sprinted to greet him. "Mr. Cole, what an honor. We didn't expect." "I own the property," Julian said, not unkindly. "I like to check on events personally when I can." His eyes swept the crowd, and then they stopped. On me. I watched confusion cross his face, then something else. Something that looked like disbelief. He walked past Bradford's mother without finishing her sentence. Past the head table. Past 200 guests who parted like he was pulling gravity along with him. He stopped in front of table 14. In front of me. "Ellie," he said. Only one person had ever called me that. My breath caught in my throat. Julian. 23 years ago, Julian Cole was 19-year-old Julian, the boy who washed dishes at the diner where I worked double shifts, the boy I'd fed leftover pie to on nights he clearly hadn't eaten, the boy whose mother had died and whose father had disappeared into a bottle, leaving him with nothing but a duffel bag and nowhere to sleep. I let him stay in my apartment's spare room for 8 months. I didn't have much, but I had enough to share. He left for California with $200 I'd slipped into his jacket pocket and a promise that he'd pay me back someday. I never expected someday to look like this. "You're the woman who saved my life," Julian said. Loud enough that the microphone Bradford had abandoned on the table picked it up and threw his voice across the entire tent. "You fed me when I had nothing. You gave me a bed when my own father wouldn't. And I just watched a grown man call you a rat in front of everyone you love." The tent went silent. Bradford's face drained of color. "Sir, I didn't know she was." "You didn't need to know who she was," Julian said, his voice sharpening. "You needed to know she's a human being." Claire stood frozen by the head table, one hand pressed to her mouth. Julian turned to me and extended his hand, the same gesture I remembered from a boy standing on my porch step at 19, terrified and grateful and trying not to cry. "Would you dance with me, Ellie? For old times?" I looked at Claire. She looked back at me, and for the first time all evening, I saw something crack behind her eyes, shame maybe, or the beginning of it. "I'd love to," I said. We danced in the middle of that vineyard tent, while 200 wealthy strangers watched a millionaire treat a 61-year-old baker like she was the most important person in the room. Because for a few minutes she was. When the song ended, Julian didn't let go of my hand right away. "I looked for you for years," he said quietly, just between us. "After the company took off, I tried to find that diner. It had closed. Nobody knew where you'd gone. I moved when I opened my first bakery," I said. "Ohio wasn't kind to small businesses." "You built something," he said. "It wasn't a question. 3 locations now. Nothing like this." I gestured vaguely at the vineyard, the helicopter, the small fortune of flowers. "It's not about the size," Julian said. "It's about who you were when nobody was watching. You were kind when you had every reason not to be. I don't forget that." Bradford's father appeared at Julian's elbow, sweating through his tuxedo shirt. "Mr. Cole, on behalf of the family, we're mortified by my son's behavior. Please let us." "You don't owe me an apology," Julian said, not looking at him. "You owe her one." The old man turned to me, stammering something that might have been sorry, might have just been fear of losing a business relationship. I didn't need his apology. I needed my daughter's. Claire crossed the dance floor slowly, her wedding dress dragging petals across the wood. Bradford tried to follow, but Julian stepped almost casually into his path. "Give them a minute," Julian said. Claire stopped in front of me. Up close, I could see her makeup was smudged, her hands trembling. "Mom," her voice broke. I should have said something. I should have stopped him the second he opened his mouth. Instead, I just stood there. "Yes," I said. "You did." I wasn't going to pretend it hadn't hurt just because a helicopter had landed. "I'm so ashamed," Claire whispered. "Of him. Of myself. I let him make jokes about you for months and I laughed along because I didn't want to make waves. I thought that's what marriage meant, picking your battles. There's a difference between picking battles and abandoning your own mother in front of a crowd," I said. Tears spilled down her cheeks, cutting through the careful makeup. I know, Mom. Please." I looked at my daughter, the little girl who used to fall asleep on the diner counter while I finished my shift, who used to tell everyone her mother made the best pie in Ohio, and I felt the anger loosen its grip just slightly. "I love you, Claire," I said. "That's never going to change. But I need you to understand something. Love doesn't mean staying silent while someone humiliates the person who raised you. If you can't find your voice for me today, I worry about the day you'll need it for yourself." She nodded, crying harder now. Behind her, Bradford had gone pale and small, watching his marriage's first day unravel in front of the one man whose venue held his family's business contracts. Julian's uncle, Walter, an older man in a gray suit who'd arrived with him and had been quietly observing everything from near the bar, finally stepped forward. I hadn't noticed him until now, but apparently he'd seen the whole exchange from the beginning. "Julian," Walter said, "you might want to tell her the rest." Julian gave a small, almost embarrassed smile. "There's something else, Ellie. Something I've been trying to arrange for months, actually. Before I even knew you'd be standing in my venue tonight." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded envelope. "I've been developing a program to fund small business owners who got their start the hard way. No investors, no family money, nothing but grit. scholarships, grants, mentorship. We launch next quarter. He handed me the envelope. I want you on the board, not as a favor, because you're exactly the kind of person this program needs. Someone who understands what it means to build something from nothing and still find room to be generous. I opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a formal letter, a seat on a foundation board, and a number that made my breath catch. An initial grant in my name, for my bakeries to expand into underserved neighborhoods back home. Julian, I can't. You can, he said. You already gave me everything I needed once. Let me return the favor on a bigger scale. Bradford's mother, watching all of this with an expression caught between horror and calculation, suddenly found her voice. Eleanor, we had no idea you were involved with someone of Mr. Cole's stature. If we'd known. That's exactly the problem, Julian cut in, his tone cooling instantly. You shouldn't need to know someone's net worth to treat them with basic decency. My mother worked 3 jobs and died with nothing in her bank account. She deserved respect too. Everyone does. The tent stayed silent except for the string quartet, still playing softly, unaware of the storm that had just passed through. Bradford finally approached, his earlier bravado gone, replaced by the stiff posture of a man realizing how much he'd risked with a careless joke. Mrs. Voss, he said, using my name for possibly the first time all evening. I was drunk. That's not an excuse. It was cruel and I'm sorry. I studied him for a long moment. I don't need you to apologize because a powerful man is standing next to me, I said. I need you to understand that the way you treat people when you think it doesn't cost you anything. That's who you really are. He swallowed hard, nodding. You married my daughter, I continued. That means you're part of my family now, whether either of us likes it in this moment. So I'm going to hope for her sake that tonight taught you something you needed to learn early, instead of 10 years and 2 kids down the road. Claire reached for his hand. He let her take it, but his eyes stayed on me, chastened. Julian touched my shoulder gently. For what it's worth, Ellie, the offer stands regardless of how tonight ends for them. This isn't charity. It's overdue payment. I laughed, a real laugh, the first of the night. You always were stubborn about paying your debts. You taught me that too, he said. The reception resumed, awkwardly at first, then with the strange resilience that human gatherings have. Music played. Plates were cleared. Bradford's family made a visible effort to include me at the head table for the remaining toasts, though I quietly declined and returned to table 14, where this time several guests came to sit beside me, suddenly very interested in the woman who danced with Julian Cole. I didn't need their sudden interest. I'd needed my daughter's voice an hour earlier, and she'd found it too late to prevent the wound, but just in time to begin healing it. Before I left that night, Claire found me by the vineyard's edge, away from the noise, where the grapevines stretched dark and endless under the string lights. I'm going to do better, she said. Starting tonight. I don't care what it costs socially. You're my mother. That should have never been a question. It shouldn't have, I agreed. But I'm glad you know it now. She hugged me, and for a moment, I felt the little girl from the diner counter again. The one who used to say her mother made the best pie in Ohio and meant it with her whole small heart. 6 months later, my first expansion bakery opened in a neighborhood that hadn't seen a new small business in over a decade. Julian came to the ribbon cutting. No helicopter this time, just a quiet visit and a proud smile. Claire was there too, wearing an apron, flour on her hands, working the counter beside me like she used to when she was small. Bradford came by after work most days, humbler now, still learning, still trying. People sometimes ask me if I've forgiven him. I tell them forgiveness isn't a single moment. It's a decision you renew every day someone shows you they've changed. What I've never had to renew is my belief in a simple truth I learned that night, standing in a navy dress in front of 200 strangers. The people who truly value you were never the ones counting your net worth. They were the ones who remembered your kindness long after you'd forgotten you'd given it. And sometimes all it takes for the world to see your worth is one person walking through the door who never forgot.